And we are live with this week's edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside by Andrew Johnson. And Andrew, it is finally that time. The Fall Classic is just around the corner as MLB Postseason Baseball is finally upon us. Today was the last day of the regular season, and we now know the postseason matches for this upcoming postseason. Have some interesting matches to look forward to going into this postseason, but a very tumultuous past couple of days just deciding who would be these final teams getting into it. So it should lead to some great postseason action in the MLB.
I've aged 3 decades in 3 days.
I can only wonder why.
Starting on that debacle on Thursday, but I'm excited. I'm not going to go into that right now. We can save that horror show for later. But let's talk about baseball. Let's talk about the postseason. What teams are going to make a big run? The scrappy underdogs versus the powerhouse teams. I'm excited because here's the thing. All teams are equal come October and November when it comes to the MLB postseason.
Right.
It's not like the NBA or the NFL where, the 1 seed's always going to advance or the 2 seed. No, more often than not, they kind of get their asses kicked a lot.
Well, we saw last year with the Braves.
I mean, listen, we see it happen all the time.
Right.
Whether it's these miracle runs, whether it's the Nationals, whether it's the Phillies last year, even though sometimes you don't win it all. You see these teams that they're kind of written off, they're scrappy underdogs. Listen, baseball is the only sport where you can't fast forward. You can't chew clock. You have to play all 27 outs. That's how it is. You can't take time off, whatever. You have to play every single inning. You have to play every single batter. That's what makes it so unpredictable. So, yeah, we have an idea who's going to win, but that's what makes this sport so great.
Yeah, I mean, some of the teams that we expected to make the World Series and make the playoffs didn't even make the postseason as a whole. Teams like the San Diego Padres, the Yankees, the Mets, the Cardinals, for a couple of teams, as for example. Those are teams we expected to make the postseason and maybe make a trip to go into the World Series. And all in all, they didn't even make the postseason as a whole. So now we're sitting in the scenario where some of these young, scrappy teams that we didn't expect to be here are now in the postseason and realistically have a good chance of winning it all. Teams like the Baltimore Orioles, who we did not expect at the beginning of the year, have made a monster push. You could have had your opinions on Texas. I mean, some people liked them. Some people thought that, you know what, the history of the Rangers the last couple of years has not been great, so they haven't been able to make the postseason. I don't like the way that their history's been going the last couple of years. They make the postseason. How about your Miami Marlins? They made the postseason as a team that
I had
no one
them
expected.
penciled in. I had them penciled in. I had them winning 85 games. That's what I said beginning of the season. 85 games in a postseason there. Now, how they got to 85 games, well, we'll talk about that a little bit, but we'll talk about with the Mets news. But, yeah, a lot of these teams, scrappy underdogs. Texas Rangers.
Arizona Diamondbacks, too.
Did anyone see the Texas Rangers doing this? What about the Toronto? I mean, I kind of called the Blue Jays, too.
I think the people saw the Rangers had the talent. It was going to be, can it all coexist to the point where they finally make that push to get into the postseason? Because that's been the problem for the Rangers the last couple of seasons. They've had the talent. They have not been able to get there. And the biggest concern was their pitching. They never really had a rotation
now
before the season, and finally they were able to get some help.
You know what's great about baseball, too?
Go on.
You know what's great? You know what's great? The Marlins and the Diamondbacks both have a negative run differential in the NL.
Right.
Granted, Arizona's, isn't as egregious. It's only -8. Miami's -52. That's horrific. The Cubs and the Padres both have at least 100 run differentials positive, and they didn't make the postseason. I would say the Padres, this is the weirdest case of a team I've ever seen. They have probably the Cy Young winner. They have multiple good bats, guys getting 20, 25 plus home runs. It just doesn't make any sense. But what actually on that roster from top to bottom, the talent they have in the individual stats, it just didn't come together. And when it finally came together, it was too late. If the Padres started playing like they did in the last month, a month sooner, they probably could have won the division.
They would have made the postseason.
No, to be honest with you, they probably could have won the division. If they started playing like No, I'm saying, like, you know how they really picked it up at the end of the season? Like, they went on a
Yeah, no, I know
tear.
what you're getting at.
They win like 80% of the games. Like, listen, go back a month beforehand. You maybe have a month where you could win 18 or 19 games if they probably lost, 13 or 14 games. You flip that around, and, they could have forfeited the division even.
Well, it all depends on how you start the season too, because the Padres did not start the season off great, and that's really at the end of the day what
That was the
hurt them
indictment.
in not making the postseason. So that that's a catalyst for potential disaster if you don't really start off strong. Sometimes you can, you have those moments like the Phillies, for example, did start their season off strong last year, and then they go all the way to the World Series and almost come up winning a championship. The Nationals, when they won the World Series, they start the first month of the season under 500, and they went on to win the whole thing. It really comes down to you need to bounce back after a bad first month, and the Padres just never did that. They caught fire just really too late. And I saw the best example being an NFL example. I think it was the 2010 Chargers, if I'm not mistaken. They had the number one rated offense, the number two rated defense, and they didn't make the playoffs either. So San Diego just has some bad, juju. I guess if that's the case.
I mean, they're going to be cursed from what Machado said a couple of years ago.
I don't know. I don't know where they go. But Bob Melvin's rumored to maybe be the new manager of the San Francisco Giants. Obviously, they fired Gabe Kapler. He's no longer with the team, so now they're looking for a new manager. But yeah, they're in a weird spot right now, and it's tough with the Dodgers being so good. They're still winning 100 games and still winning the division, and now being the number 2 seed in the NL behind the Atlanta Braves, who have the best record in the National League and all of baseball. So it's really going to be tough for San Diego to get back from this this tough of a season. But we got to talk about some of the teams that made the entire thing itself. And, we talked about some of the teams that being surprising. I remember when we did our original, preview show, we didn't really talk about the Baltimore Orioles as much because they were just such a young team when we looked at them. And we thought, you know what?
Let's. I'm going to defend ourselves right here. When we spoke about the Baltimore Orioles, we said they were probably a year away from being ready because the pieces were there. Away. I was always the biggest fan of Heston Kjerstad.
Of course.
From listen, I've been holding on to his stuff for a couple of years now. I think he was going to be really great, and he's finally getting granted, he's getting pinch hits in the major leagues right now, but guys like Adley, Rutschman, immediately put together. He's already, I think, one of the top catchers in the AL.
And all baseball.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think he's definitely top 3 in the AL, and I mean, I would have to think about the NL.
I put Adley as a top 5 catcher right now. I wouldn't hesitate on that.
Yeah, and guys like Gunnar Henderson, which I think Gunnar Henderson is better than Adley, and he went really overlooked, and he may win the Rookie of the Year right now.
I think he is right now the front runner for Rookie of the Year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so a guy that was kind of living in Adley's shadow, he got to really show out this year. He has the power and he's got speed. He gets a lot of walks. Just a fantastic defensive player, and he plays at a premium position too. Because if he was an outfielder doing this, you would expect this, but it's with his defensive presence as a shortstop combined with the power he has with that bat, he can hit home runs, which makes him such a exciting player.
Right. And I think when it comes down to it for Baltimore, the question is going to be, will the youth get to them in the postseason? Because obviously now a lot of them are going to have that postseason experience compared to teams like Tampa and Houston that have been there before and have obviously made runs at a World Series. The Astros obviously winning it last year. Tampa was in the World Series just a couple of years ago and very well could have won that World Series too. But it's really going to come down to, can Baltimore's youth get them far in this postseason run? They're a team that a lot of people like to watch just because of how fun these players are and just how well they gel as a team.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. You could even say as a Yankee fan, like it's fun to watch.
Right,
I'm sorry, they might own your division for the next 10 years if they can
probably
pay. But it's interesting and they're a fun watch.
Right, and listen, if they are able to do so, they would obviously have to face a tough matchup though in the ALDS. We'll preview the bracket as a whole if you want to get into that, Andrew, because the bracket itself is very interesting because of some of the matchups that we have and the potential matchups we could have going into the ALDS and the NLDS as a whole. I know for you, obviously, your Marlins take on the Philadelphia Phillies, and then the winner would go on to Atlanta to take on the Braves. So either way, you're going to get an NL East matchup in the National League Divisional Series. But as a Marlins fan, I want you to talk about how do you feel going into the series against Philadelphia with
This
the
is going to
potential
be
to go into Atlanta?
this is going to be a bloodbath. Geez, how can I even start this? Well, I guess this is going to start the wild card preview, right?
Yes, sir.
So let's start. Yeah, so let's start with my Miami Marlins. I am a big fan. To me, this is kind of remnant. This is reminding me from a couple of years ago. Remember how a certain sports analyst called them the bottom feeders, and
Yep.
that kind of really struck. This is where I think the real revolution of the last couple of years comes from, and this is where the identity, like, oh, we're bottom feeders, et cetera, whatever, and they've kind of bought into this. And these guys know, like, okay, ESPN, Fox Sports, whoever it is, they're writing this team off. The players know that, and they went out there and performed. And granted, I will give credit where credit is due. I wasn't really a big fan of the GM or the
new manager, Skip Schumacher. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say the skipper, Skip Schumacher, but I feel like that would have been redundant. So I was looking.
The
Skip.
Skip.
Yeah, the skipper Skip. Listen. He's a young guy. It's really his first gig. He's kind of leaving. He left the St. Louis Cardinals cocoon out there, and they did a great job. He was fighting for his players. They actually signed players to big contracts. Granted, not every move was a home run, like Avi Garcia. That wasn't really great. Jorge Soler wasn't great last year, but he really popped off this year. You committed to a guy like Sandy. You paid him. You spoke to the face of your franchise in Jazz Chisholm, and you made a trade for Luis Arias, who turns out to be probably, it's going to be an interesting trade going in for all other GMs to kind of look at in the future. That the Luis Arias trade ended up being a win-win trade. I really didn't like it at first because Pablo was such a great pitcher. And he killed it this year for the Twins. He's probably a big reason why they made the postseason this year.
Absolutely.
And Luis Arias is the same thing, but so it was kind of like, well, I don't want to say addition by subtraction, but just swapping those guys out because we already had good pitching. You have Sandy, you have Braxton Garrett, you have Jesus Luzardo, who had another great season, really improved again. So you already had guys, and you had guys in the pipeline like Yuri Perez and Edward Cabrera, and if those guys put together, then you have a starting five that, okay, yeah, I know you're losing Pablo Lopez. He's probably your second or third best pitcher, and that's, no disrespect to him. He's a great pitcher, and anyone would want him as rotation, but when they desperately need the bats, and you got a guy like Luis Arias, I know he only gets singles, he doesn't really hit for power, but he can get on base, and that's what a team like that needs.
Right.
He got on base. He, for the first time ever, NL and AL won the batting title in back-to-back divisions. Back-to-back
seasons.
Seasons, yeah. One for the NL, one for the AL. It's the first time I think that's ever happened. So that was amazing accomplishment. But now we're going to the Phillies. For a long time, Philadelphia Phillies, they were once a proud franchise. But after that World Series win about 15 years ago, they went on a streak of mediocrity where they couldn't go above 500. And now all of a sudden, the last couple of years, they've been really improving. And you know what? Even though I don't like the Phillies, it's obviously division rival. So this is what's going to make it so interesting because you have the scrappy underdogs that would usually be the Philadelphia Phillies, but they're going to be playing the role as the powerhouse here.
Right.
So they're going to, like, if you saw the Phillies last year with their postseason run, like, oh, they were the scrappy underdogs. No, now they're established. You have guys like Bryce Harper. And he's going to show up every single day. Doesn't matter if he had surgery and he's only DH, et cetera, et cetera. But you have guys like Bryce Harper. You have great pitching like Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler. And I hate to say it, a guy like Ranger Suarez, he was really good this year. Yeah. He really stepped up. Taijuan Walker, great season for him too. And then you have a closer too. They have a great closer in Craig Kimbrell. So on the actual just pitching wise, they're gonna be fantastic. And then you have Nick Castellanos, Kyle Schwarber, Alec Baum, JT, former Marlin, JT Realmuto, Bryce Harper, who we mentioned, and a guy who I think is having another great season, really went under the radar. And I think the Angels made a mistake letting go of this guy, Brandon Marsh, 25 years old,
Yeah, he had a really good
Really,
year.
really took the league by storm, and he wasn't really doing anything over there. They came to Phillies, and they seemed to unlock his potential. So they got a lot of stuff on both sides of the ball here. It's going to be interesting to see the matchups being played because we kind of saw this. For those who don't know, Jazz Chisholm hits like 300 versus righties, but when it comes to the lefty, he can't, he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn.
Right.
So
But
it's going to
keep
be
in
interesting.
mind, go ahead.
No, I mean, I've been talking a lot here, but the one thing I kind of want to finish on here is it's going to be interesting how the pitching actually comes out. Like, if they're going to play around the strengths and weaknesses, if they're going to really, we're going to be committed to attacking Jazz, kind of like how the Mets did on one of their last games of the season. They kept on putting in lefty pitchers. They would swap them out every inning or every 2 innings and just put the new lefty in, just so they would attack Jazz.
Right.
And sometimes, it kind of backfired. Because he had that really clutch hit at the end there, puts him up, and then, unfortunately, the game eventually, gets rained out. But it can kind of light a fire under guys. So you have to kind of, you could be playing with fire, and it could backfire. So you have to really take it with stride. But I'm going to let you give your thoughts on this because I feel like I could talk all day about the Marlins.
Well, here's what I think about the Marlins and what gives you and you talked about Jazz Chisholm, and I liked how you brought that up. Think about what the Phillies have in their rotation as in terms of their best starters. Wheeler and Nola obviously are their top two. Those are both right-handed hitters. So that gives Jazz Chisholm a great opportunity right there alone. So that's one. Then the question really is, because remember, the wild card series is a 3-game series, so who would the Phillies turn to in that potential game 3 if it has to get to it?
Maybe
Would it be a Taijuan Walker? Could it be Ranger Suarez just to avoid Jazz Chisholm getting that righty matchup? He gets the lefty-lefty. There's a lot of opportunities, but I think the Phillies, the thing going for them is their bullpen has so many left-handed pitchers in it. They have guys like Gregory Soto, Matt Strahm, Jose Alvarado. I mean, that's going to be the big thing for the Phillies going in this series. But for your team as the Marlins, listen, we've known the last couple of years that they've had issues in the bullpen, but they fixed that in this season. It hasn't been the prettiest year for you guys in terms of your bullpen, but it has been way better than it has been in recent years, and I think that is something that's key for you guys.
We were blowing a lot of games midway through the season when we got David Peterson from the Mets, and then they realized this guy's not a closer. So they moved him to the 8th spot, and ever since he went to the 8th spot, he's been money. So
You're talking about AJ Puck, right?
I'm talking about David Peterson. He's in the 8th spot right now. He's been pitching the 8 spots for us.
He's still in the. You mean David Robertson?
Jesus, yes, David Robertson.
I was going to say, we saw David Peterson on Thursday.
I know, we saw him on Thursday for the Mets. I meant David Robertson. Yeah, ever since we moved him to the 8th spot, he's been a lot better. But he wasn't really a true wrong David from the Mets. My apologies. But yeah, we moved him from the 8th spot to from the 9th spot, and he's been a lot better since then. Because when he first came over, I thought he was like a plant from the Mets. Like he would come in and he would just blow the game. There's a point.
Secret spy.
Yeah, no, listen, there was a point where he blew like 4 or 5 games in a row. It's like I was like, dude, what's actually going on over here right now? And no, they fixed him up. They sent him to the 8th spot where he wasn't that bad. And I think he only gave up 2 earned runs in the whole month of September. So that was a very big positive out of him.
Right. And I think the last question I have before we go into the next series would be for you. How do you like your team's chances in terms of your rotation? Obviously, there's injuries to Yuri Perez. There's injuries to Sandy Alcantara. And obviously, it looks like Braxton Garrett or Luzardo. I believe they're going to Braxton Garrett in game number 1.
Braxton Garrett has been cooking. He's been his development has been one of the biggest surprises this season. He was a guy that kind of like last year, kind of like Jesus Luzardo, had his ups and downs, but towards the end of last season, he was putting it together. Right. And now is the guy. He had 160 innings pitched. His ERA was around 3.5. His WHIP was below 120. So he was dealing too. He had 100. He was probably getting about a strikeout in an inning. So it's not like he was just getting lucky. Like I like to say Domingo Germán because he's a guy that doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, but he plays the ball well. Like they'll go straight to the first baseman, or it'll be right up the middle to the pitcher, whatever. But Braxton Garrett's a guy who can deal a lot of strikeouts. So he didn't have the greatest start against the Mets the other day. He kind of got blown up, and it happens. But he's still a very young pitcher. I think he's only about 25, 26 years old, and they're gonna put him in the big spot here. I like not putting Jesus Luzardo in the first spot because I think he is the better pitcher. but I think they want to kind of save him to close it out. Does that make sense? Because I think they could win with Garrett, and they want to like guarantee the win with Luzardo.
Right, because I think that's the biggest thing, trying to get the winning game 2, because if it goes to game 3, that's going to be the concern for you guys, is who do you go to in that spot? Do you go to Edward Cabrera, or do you give it to a guy like Johnny Cueto, who's had the postseason experience before and obviously knows how to pitch in those situations, whether they be good or bad? I think that's going to be interesting to see what Miami would do in a potential spot like that.
Yeah, Cueto he just gives up too many runs. I like the guy, but he just he serves up meatballs nowadays. It's not like the 27-year-old Johnny Cueto. He's way past his prime. Right. I would maybe here's the thing. This is gonna sound crazy. I would start with a bullpen game with our best closers coming out first. Not closers, but maybe relievers, put out best relievers coming out there. You like Andrew Nardi, or I'm gonna say it again, David Robertson, not David Peterson.
There you go.
And then maybe switching to Cabrera to like finish out the game, like the last couple innings. I think that's how I would run, because they've done that a couple times and it's worked. So that's something I would look at for game 3.
I think it's going to come down to how often will the Marlins use their bullpen in the first 2 games for you guys against Philadelphia, because obviously we know how good their bats are. It's going to be up to your starting pitching to make sure that they don't have to use.
I'd be surprised we got 5. I'd be surprised we got 6 innings out of both of them.
Listen, desperate times call for desperate measures. The entire series is going to be Philadelphia, so for the Marlins, this is a great opportunity, but I think a lot of people would have to think that the Phillies are the favorite going into the series. Obviously, I know where you stand
Marlins
with that.
By million.
We'll make our predictions for the wild card series as a whole, but let's move on to the other NL wild card matchup. That's between the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Milwaukee Brewers. The Brewers winning the NL Central. They had a rough start to the season, really picked it up in the second half, and was able to win the division as a whole. And for the Diamondbacks, they had a great start to the season. They have a really good first half, kind of slowed down midway through the second half of the season, but were able to get it back going in the final 2 months of the year. They make the postseason as the final wild card team in the National League. And they're also a team like Baltimore in terms of they used a lot of youth on their team. New guys like Corbin Carroll, for example, really lit a spark under this team, getting them into the postseason. And now they have an interesting matchup with Milwaukee where a lot of people could potentially pick them to win this series.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the Diamondbacks. I don't think Milwaukee is that good. I feel like the Diamondbacks, it was this with the entire NL wildcard race, everyone was just trying to grasp defeat from the jaws of victory. The Cubs did their fair share, the Marlins did their fair share, and for a second I was kind of getting worried that the Diamondbacks weren't going to make it. So I'm glad they actually they finished the season strong and they could actually make the playoffs. But the Diamondbacks are interesting because you got guys like Corbin Carroll, which seem to be the future of the MLB. And then you have like established vets that are kind of having, I don't want to say a renaissance in the career right now, but like a guy like Christian Yelich, who's been a lot better than he was a couple of years ago. But he's still not in his prime form, but it seems like he's getting back to it.
Yeah, Yelich had a very good year for Milwaukee. And for the Diamondbacks too, I mean, you have guys like Ketel Marte and Christian Walker for your offense that have been really good for them. They had a really good trade with the Blue Jays in the offseason, getting guys like Lourdes Gurriel and Gabriel Moreno for their lineup when they traded away Dalton Varsho. They have been really good for them on the season. And then really the biggest thing for this team is also their pitching. The concern for their pitching, though, for Arizona is going to be after their top 2. What happens in a potential Game 3 scenario? You have, obviously, Zach Gallen, a Cy Young candidate. Merrill Kelly is a very solid number 2 option for this team. But after that, that's where it gets concerning. That might be a scenario where you mentioned with the Marlins where the Diamondbacks might have to consider a bullpen game going into that potential Game 3. Where on the other side, Milwaukee, we know what their rotation is. They have that formidable top 3 in Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff, and Freddie Peralta. So the Brewers, what they have lying for them is they have pitching that can lead them going far into this postseason because they have those top 3 guys. Devin Williams is a very good closer. Yeah, that's been the Brewers' problem for a while.
I mean, I think Carlos Santana, he's like 38 years old, is the second best player in that, the second best bat on that team.
Well, you look at this team, and they're very weird with its lineup. You have guys that were cut and traded. Mark Canha, for example, was a Met. He got traded there. Carlos Santana, you mentioned, was also traded there. They have Josh Donaldson, who was cut by the Yankees. He's now the starting third baseman at the current moment. They are very weird when it comes to their lineup, but to their credit, it has worked the last couple months of the season, and now they're in the postseason as a division winner. And like I mentioned, it's really because of how good their pitching has been for them most of this season. And when you have good pitching going down the stretch of a year, going into the postseason, that tends to lead to a lot of good success in the postseason. So it's going to be interesting to see a contrast of matchups between a young hitting team. I shouldn't say as young, but a well-balanced lineup in Arizona facing a really good pitching front in Milwaukee and seeing who comes out on top. So that should lead to a very interesting series with the winner obviously going to Los Angeles to take on the Dodgers in the National League Divisional Series. So those two teams will have an interesting matchup, to say the least.
One guy I will say that is going to be the X factor here is going to be Sal Frelick. He had
Sal Frelick, okay.
He was having a monster September up until the last couple of games. I think at one point it's small sample size, but he raised his batting average by almost 4% in the month of September before cooling off over the last couple of games because he couldn't get a hit in the last 4 games. So I think he kind of just went hitless he went 0 for 20 in the last couple of games. But before that, he was on a monster tear. He was finally getting acclimated into the MLB. He had that when he made his debut, he made it with a statement early in the season. So if he could kind of channel that Sal Frelick from 2 weeks ago, I think they could win this series.
Yeah, I mean, we'll go more into the series as a whole when we make our prediction for that National League Wildcard Series. Because, like I mentioned, I think there is a lot of good potential out of both of those series in the National League. Because we saw last year with Philadelphia, they went from the wild card, they went all the way to the World Series. Any of these 4 teams could make the very same case that, hey, listen, we're no slouch either. We could make that type of a run if things were to click for us in this postseason. So we'll have to see how that unfolds when we talk about that a little bit later on in the show. But now, let's shift it over to the American League side. And they also have some very interesting series in this wild card round. We'll start off with the first series being the 6th-seeded Toronto Blue Jays out of the American League East taking on the AL Central champion Minnesota Twins. Now, we all know it was a rough year for the AL Central. I mean, Twins were the only team above 500. The division as a whole was really, really bad, and a lot of people were saying that not really realistically, no one should have made it from this division into the playoffs, but it is what it is at this current moment, and Minnesota took advantage of it, and they were able to win the division as a whole. Now they get into the postseason with a very tough matchup in Toronto, and I say that because we all know what Toronto brings in terms of their hitting. They have one of the best lineups in all of baseball, and they have so much power on this team that can, give you a tough matchup in this postseason. The question is going to be for the Blue Jays is how is their pitching going to be in this postseason run? Obviously,
they're going to start Alek Manoah, clearly.
Clearly. They can't even start him at AAA at the current moment.
I mean, or even international. Maybe.
Yeah, apparently, I guess so. But listen, for Toronto, you have Kevin Gausman. I think that's a solid number 1. But after that's where you have your questions. Jose Barrios has his ups and downs. Chris Bassett is a veteran that has that postseason experience. Maybe he can get you some good innings out of the bullpen, or maybe just being the number 2 starter. And then you have guys like veterans like Yusei Kikuchi and Hyun-Jin Ryu who also have had postseason experience, and they definitely could come out of the bullpen in a relief scenario. But you also have a solid bullpen, Jordan Romano, one of the better closers in the game. They got Jordan Hicks from the Cardinals this trade deadline. And I mentioned their lineup. I mean, obviously, guys like Springer, you have Bo Bichette, Matt Chapman, Vlad Guerrero. Right now, Alejandro Kirk's the catcher because of Danny Jensen's injury. Veterans like Brandon Belt are on the team, Kevin Kiermaier. I talked about Dalton Varsho from the Diamondbacks, who they got in this past offseason. This is a tough lineup that the Twins are going to have to contend with, but we know the Twins, the thing that's going well for them has been their pitching. The Twins have had a very solid have had a very good season overall in terms of their pitching depth. And if they're going to have a chance in this postseason, it's really going to come down to can they get some quality innings from these guys that have been good for them all year.
Now, this is the legacy right here. I like saying like a little throwback to WWE, Ted DiBiase Jr., Randy Orton, Cody Rhodes. This is legacy. You got Vladdy Guerrero Jr., you have Kevin Biggio, you
Kevin
got Bo
Midget,
Bichette. So this is the legacy. So they have this. So if any of these guys, I know Vladdy's having a down year right now, but he's been a monster beforehand. All these guys get on the phone with their dad, be like, "Hey, listen, what was it like playing in the wild card, on the road, you're the underdog. What was it like?" They could talk to them like that.
Yeah, because remember what happened to them last year, Johnson. They were home for their wild card series against Seattle, and they obviously had that epic collapse in Game 2 that ended their season. So
and they're gonna learn. Hopefully they learned from that experience. They had conversations with their Hall of Fame or close to Hall of Fame fathers, on what to do. Like, how do you bounce back from that? Because I'm sure they all, without even talking to each other about that, that's probably the first person they called to see, like, when when the dust was settled, when they left the clubhouse and that was it for the season, to get that advice. So that's going to go. That's what people really want. I don't think they're sleeping on that right now. The advice they're getting from Hall of Famers at any time they want. And they could, give them tips on, where to sand the box to get more contact on your barrel, or how to get out of a slump, or, get out, how do you focus on game days in the opposing cities, arenas during a playoff run. So all these like little intangibles, they're going to have the answers to, and I don't think the Twins will.
Well, I think the other problem for the Twins is look at some of the injuries they currently have right now going into this postseason run. Guys like Royce Lewis are on the IL. Carlos Correa are on the IL. Joey Gallo has been on the IL. Jorge Polanco is right now day to day, so they're hoping to get him back for this run. But like I mentioned, the thing that the Twins have right now is their pitching. Sonny Gray is one of the top 5 of the American League in terms of ERA. Pablo Lopez, you mentioned earlier on in the show with the Luis Arias trade, has been pretty good for this Twins rotation as well. And then you have Joe Ryan as your number 3, with Kenta Maeda and Bailey Ober as your 4 and 5, like come out of the bullpen in terms of relief. And then Yoan Duran does have command issues, but does throw a fastball that can go up to 105, 106 miles per hour sometimes, and gives you that maybe that potential lockdown closer that they need for a postseason run. Remember, all it takes is 2 wins, and you move on to the next round of this series. So
that's the theory.
The Twins will have an opportunity to do so. The question is going to be, will they be able to get any offense in this series? And I'm just not sure if it's going to be possible because of some of the guys that are currently hurt that they could really use in the postseason run. So I'm curious to see what you'll say later on in the show when we predict this series, but it's going to be really tough with the injuries that they currently have going on in their lineup to see if they can move on. Where if they were to move on, they would take on the Houston Astros in the ALDS.
Yeah, I mean, that's, it would be the Astros, and that's going to be tough. That'd be tough no matter who it is. I don't care what kind of season they had. They really picked it up because from a team that wasn't going to be even the postseason to...
They almost did not make the postseason. Yeah, they almost didn't make it.
A team that wasn't going to be in the postseason as of like a month ago is now the number 3 seed. So that's going to be interesting to look at. But I want to talk about our final matchup. And I think
the best matchup of the wild card.
I've been kind of flip flopping on these two, and it's very hard because both these teams, I know you hate one of them and you love another one, even though they're in Dallas, or not really technically Arlington. Dallas, Arlington. It's a suburb of Dallas. Yeah, yada yada. It's Dallas. All right. We got the Rangers and the Rays. The Rangers obviously playing coming out of Texas, and Tampa Bay out of Florida. So I would say these are both scrappy underdogs.
They're different contrasts as well.
Yeah, like the contrast in the sense of like Tampa Bay is a scrappy underdog because none of these guys are like, this isn't a paid for team. This is they built this. The Rays built this team, and for the most part, the Rangers did too. So it's not like, oh yeah, we're just gonna sign Machado, Juan Soto. We got Fernando Tatis Jr. Let's go get a Cy Young winner. And then we don't make the playoffs. So what team is that? Oh yeah. Anyways,
yikes,
it happens. But yeah, these are scrappy underdog teams, and the one big move I think off the top of my head, the Rangers got DeGrom, and he's not gonna. He'll watch it on the TV.
And
Like,
say they were Max Scherzer. Remember, they acquired him at the trade deadline, and he's out for the postseason as well.
yeah, so those guys can kind of just reminisce about their Mets days on how they got paid, and now they're just sitting in the postseason anyway. But also not for the Mets, but I really like both these teams, and I'm going to defer to you to let you kind of explain a little bit more.
Well, when I was talking about the different contrasts, I think it's about the different styles that these two teams are. Now, the Rays have had a better year in terms of power, but it's really been home run or bust for them most of this season. And obviously, they have a really strong rotation. Tyler Glass now their ace. Aaron Savali has been a good pit, has been solid for them coming over from the Guardians. Zach Eflin gives you a nice, solid number 3 option. And then their bullpen, usually most of the time when it comes to the postseason, they have their better moments. And that's why Tampa concerns me in the AL. But for Texas, we all know what they did this season in terms of their lineup. They had so many of their guys in their starting lineup making the All-Star team. Josh Jung, an AL Rookie of the Year candidate until he got hurt.
Big fan of him.
Marcus Semien had a solid year. Jonah Heim had his ups and downs, but he had a good year overall. You have Corey Seager, who I don't know if he won the batting title today because of Yandy Diaz sitting out. So he either was number 1 or number 2 in the batting title at the end of the day. But Seager had an unbelievable year for Texas. And that was despite the fact that he was injured for most part of it too. Adolis Garcia is a big-time bat in that lineup. And then you look at the rotation. Obviously, they've had the injuries to DeGrom and Scherzer, but Nate Eovaldi has still been a solid pitcher for them. If he didn't get hurt, could have been up for AL Cy Young candidacy. Jordan Montgomery's had his ups and downs, but for the most part, has been good for them as well. I think the problem for Texas is going to be going into that game number 3. Who is that starter? Because it was going to be John Gray, but now John Gray is currently injured. I don't know if he'll be back in time for that potential game 3 if that was to happen, but you're leaning into the fact of now you have to go to a guy like Dane Dunning or Andrew Heaney in a potential winner-go-home scenario. And obviously with the series taking place... I'm a firm
believer of Andrew in Andrew Heaney, so he's got this.
For my sake, I hope so, because I don't want to see Tampa Bay move on. But obviously, you have Aroldis Chapman as your closer. Now, he's had some not great postseason moments for the most part. So I'm curious to see if...
the one I'm thinking of, it was confirmed they were cheating. So that's the one that comes to my mind.
Well, I try to forget that one happened, but I'm more going towards the Rajai Davis home run.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah, I know. But... yeah, I think this is going to be the best series out of them all. I think you have 2 really exciting teams. The Rangers have, finally got it all going together. They could have won the division today, too, if they had beaten the Mariners, but unfortunately they lost and Houston won, giving the Astros the division. So the Rangers could have been in the spot where they were hosting in the divisional round. It could have been having a first-round bye, but instead now they're in this wild card round, now having to try to beat a very, talented Tampa Bay Rays team. It's going to be overall a very fun series.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this series. I can't, it's
going to be tough to pick it.
It's going to be very tough to pick it, but I feel like we kind of did everything. Do you want to give our predictions now? Do you want to move on to the mushing hour?
Oh, man. If you're any of these MLB postseason teams going into this wildcard round, beware, because it's time for the mushing hour, I believe.
Yeah, it is time for our favorite section. It is time for the mushing hour, and we're going to be taking on the MLB postseason. And we're not going to be giving odds because
we don't have the odds.
We don't have the odds. I don't think the odds are out yet for the series yet.
Now, obviously, for these, what we'll do is we'll make our prediction for each series, and we'll tell you what we think is going to be how many games it will take to win each series. And then, Andrew, if you want, I know we've already made 2 World Series predictions, but obviously, they have not gone right. I don't know if your World Series prediction from the trade deadline is still alive.
It's still alive. Yes, it is.
Okay, because I know mine's definitely dead because I absolutely mushed the Cincinnati Reds to oblivion. So, if you want, you could make the same prediction if you want for the end of the show, or you could make a new one if you want to. I know one team you won't change it, but I'm curious to see if you'll do it.
No, I feel like I should be... I feel like I have to go with. Do you want to just start the World Series prediction?
You know what? Yeah, we can start off with that.
Yeah, so I think I have to still stick with Texas Rangers and Miami Marlins.
Okay.
I think
it's still alive. Yeah.
I feel like I have to do that for this continuity purposes. It's still alive, so it's not going to happen, but that's what I'm going to stick with. My God, I've been saying that for about 7 months now, so I'm going to stick with it.
Now, I know in mine, I took the Houston Astros, and I think I obviously picked the Reds, and that was by far a really bad pick. I still think the Astros get it done in the American League. Now the problem is going to be the National League. And it would be so obvious to take the Dodgers or the Braves, but I just feel like something's going to go wrong for one of these two teams. But then again, I don't want to see Philadelphia. I don't want to see Philadelphia in it. Oh, man. Yeah, I hate to do it. Just give me Atlanta and Houston. No, I don't like fun.
Atlanta, Houston, you are no fun.
Yeah, but think about it. If I pick that right, then if I mush it, then we're all having fun because then it works out for everyone.
So you're taking A-Town down?
Oh, you asking me who wins it?
Oh no, I'm just saying you're taking A-Town down, right?
In A-Town down versus H-Town, yeah.
Yeah, A-Town down versus H-Town. All
Disgusting. Right. Nonetheless, now let's get into the wild card matchups as a whole, and we'll tell you how and who we think could be maybe the X factors in this series, and who will end up winning the series as a whole. Andrew, which game would you like to start off with? Maybe we'll save your Marlins for last because I know you would like to get into that a little bit more, if possible.
I'll spend the entire day on that. Let's start with the Blue Jays and the Twins.
Okay.
Listen, no disrespect to the Twins. I have the utmost respect to Pablo Lopez, Byron Buxton, the entire Minnesota Twins organization. I had said at the deadline, even though that they were kind of they were below 500, I said they were going to finish strong and they were going to be the ones that win the division. The division, they weren't even close. Cleveland just completely, the wheels fell off the wagon there.
Yeah, it got to the point where the Tigers finished in second.
Yeah, I mean, it was Jose Ramirez holding the weight of a world on his shoulders for another year, and it just fell apart. And the Twins stayed strong. Now, given that information, I'm still going to pick the Blue Jays because of the reasons I said before. It is the legacy. It is Kevin Biggio. It is Vladdy Guerrero Jr. It is Bo Bichette. They have people they can lean on. Their fathers who played in the MLB for many seasons and who are very successful. They have some great pitching. And I don't care if the Twins are hosting it because you know what? I'm going to ride with Toronto. They're going to learn from their mistakes from last year. I think they're the better team.
This is tough. I'm trying to think of the last time the Minnesota Twins won a playoff game. I'm trying to think of the history of this team. And it hasn't been good, let's face facts. They've had some great years in the previous history. But the stat I have, Andrew, the last 22 games for the Minnesota Twins, they've won one playoff game in those 22 playoff games.
Well, haven't they been playing
They've mostly been playing the Yankees. That's been their problem.
That's
so okay. The boogeyman's not here this time.
Yeah.
However, I think the Blue Jays are just more talented enough when it comes to offense. And the only way that the Twins are going to have a chance is going to be the rotation. Unfortunately, I just don't see this going to a third game. I have the Blue Jays winning this in 2.
Oh, okay. Wow.
I just think overall the Blue Jays have the better lineup. I think they'll be able to get they'll be able to get the ball to their relievers before later than the Twins will have to go to their relievers. And I think at the end of the day that's going to hurt them. The Twins just have too many injuries on their offensive side, and I think that's going to be what kills them at the end of the day. But hey, listen, you got to the postseason, so congrats.
Congrats to them as well. Let's go. Let's stick in the AL, and let's talk about the God bless Texas Rangers and the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. So it's like this is a heaven and hell type of situation over here. This is my take on it. The Tampa Bay Rays organization had to know about Wander Franco's action, so they were going to be smited and punished. Listen, before this went public, the police had to contact them for a couple of questions. That's all I'm going to say. I cannot confirm that.
Okay.
But that is my take on it. So I feel like if they were trying to cover up from them, they were going to be smited.
I'm definitely not cringing as you keep talking.
Listen. I feel. Listen. The Rangers are scrappy underdogs. I know these are both homegrown teams, but I would feel wrong picking Tampa Bay after these allegations that came up with their star player. And I could guarantee if these allegations never brought to light and if they knew about them, like let's just say they kind of they contact him, he would still be playing right now for that organization. So give me Texas Rangers in a sweep. I don't care how good the Tampa Bay Devil Rays are, because that's their true name, the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, and they're going against God Bless Texas. So give me Texas Rangers 2-0.
God bless Texas. Well, I think my bias is going to show in this series, unfortunately. However, I do think this goes to 3 games just because of how good these two teams are. I do have the Texas Rangers winning it in 3. I think just because the lineup for the Rangers is really good. I think at the end of the day, they'll have... I think the Rays, where my concern is going to be is after Glasnow, will Savali and Eflin give you those quality starts potentially in a potential maybe do-or-die game? I just don't know if it's possible. I very well could see Tampa Bay winning game 1 because of Glasnow and then losing the next 2 just because of the rotation. But then again, Texas doesn't have a strong rotation either. This really could come down to who scores the most runs in this game just because of how good the offenses have been for the most of the season. All of these games realistically could be a shootout.
Yeah, so it's going to be exciting, and I can't wait for that. All right, let's talk about the Diamondbacks and the Brew Crew. I kind of went into this before. Diamondbacks had a hell of a season on the backs of their rookies who, MVP candidate? Yes, no, maybe.
Well, Corbin Carroll?
Corbin Carroll MVP? No.
I think that kind of died down at the season ended, but the way Acuna was this season, there's no way he's not going to win it.
I mean, listen, he got 70 steals. That happens,
Yeah, 70 steals and 40 home runs. So that's saying here. Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts too for the Dodgers. They had unbelievable years. Corbin Carroll definitely deserves, all the flowers for what he did for this team. Not disrespecting him at all. Just it's tough with all the other, the other guys in the NL the way they've been this season.
Yeah, so gonna be a great game or a great series. I like the Brew Crew. They got the best pitching there. They got a lot of really good rookies out on Arizona. With some crafty veterans to kind of lead them into this postseason. It's going to be tough. But I feel like I have to go for the Brewers because they're going to have home field advantage, and they have the better pitching. I don't think they're ready for this three-man rotation like you kind of mentioned before. So I'm going to give you the Brewers 2-1.
Okay. We're agreeing a lot, but I'm not going to go in 3. I think the Brewers win this in 2 games.
Okay, they get a game.
I think game 1 is going to come down to who scores the first run. I think you realistically could be a 1-0, 2-0 final in that game, just because you're going to have Corbin Burnes versus Zach Gallen, a really good pitching matchup. And I think at the end of the day, the Brewers will have more postseason experience than this Diamondbacks team does, and I think that will just lead to them winning the series. And you mentioned it, the pitching is definitely going to be the factor in this. And at the end of the day, after Gallen, Morel Kelly's not bad as number 2, but then after that, it doesn't get any prettier for the Diamondbacks. So it's good that they got to the postseason. They're still a little bit far away from getting there. They still need some pitching help. But for now, this is a good stepping stone to get even better as the years goes on.
All right, so now we have our final game. My Miami Marlins taking on the Philadelphia Phillies. I kind of went into this a lot before. Probably I had like a 5-minute rant, so I'm not going to take up any more time. And I'm just going to say Marlins 2-1 because they're going to clinch it in Miami. And this is my...
What do you mean you clinch it in Miami? They don't.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Jeez. In my heart, they're going to clinch it in Miami. They're going to clinch it.
For the viewers at home, all the games are in the home team's stadium.
They're all in the home team stadium. I'm thinking for the next round here. When it's going to be,
they're facing Atlanta.
Yeah, when they're facing Atlanta, then they're going to clinch in Atlanta. My apologies.
He's getting ahead of himself.
Getting ahead of myself here. Give me Miami. Give me 2-1. It's going to be a bullpen game. It's going to be a messy game because I know after after Zach Wheeler and after Aaron Nola, I know their third starter is going to be sketchy as well. It could be Ranger Suarez. It could be Michael Lorenzen. It could be anyone. but I know it's not going to be, they're not going to be throwing gas or anything like that. So it's going to be a messy bullpen game, and the Miami's Marlins, they thrive in that chaotic environment. So the more chaos, the better. So that's why Marlins are going to clinch it in Philadelphia in the third game, and hopefully they can be in attendance.
Would you say Marlins will soar?
Not yet. I don't want to jinx them.
Okay. I'm going to do this for your own sake. I'm not going to mush your team. I'm going to take the Phillies in 3.
Okay, that's fine.
I think this is going to be a hard-fought series. I just think the Phillies obviously have more of that postseason factor. You know, they have the experience from last year. And I really still am concerned about if the Marlins go to a Game 3, what do they do in that scenario? If it's Johnny Cueto, he's obviously pitched in, situations like that before. But you mentioned it. He's been having a rough season. He's given up a lot of home runs. And if that's your Game 3 starter, that's going to be tough going into that game. So I don't know what the Phillies do in their scenario with Game 3. Maybe it's Ranger Suarez just to get the lefty-lefty matchup with a guy like Jazz. But the Phillies have been in that spot. They know how to win in those certain situations. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be unfortunately for Miami that they fall. But they're kind of like the Diamondbacks, in which it's great that they got here. This is a great stepping stone for future years where they, look at this season and be like, if we lose, what can we build on and fix going into next season, try to get back to this scenario and get even better. So it's not a bad thing if you lose. I just think the Phillies just are slightly better than this Miami Marlins team.
All right, so that's your opinion. You're entitled to it, and I hope you didn't mush my team, so I can't really blame you. So before we sign off, do you have anything else you'd like to say to our wonderful listeners out there?
We forgot to mention one thing, and I know you.
I didn't forget about it. I wanted you to bring it up, though. I don't want to be the guy.
Okay. Now I mentioned Gabe Kapler for the Giants got fired. I believe it was yesterday that happened. So obviously there's now a manager opening in San Francisco, but that is not the only manager opening that is now available, as Buck Showalter is stepping down as the manager of the New York Mets. So now the Mets will be looking for a new manager this upcoming season. They obviously made a front office change as well. David Stearns is now looking over the team and trying to help them get back into the postseason after a really bad season from the Mets where they won 74 games. And this was a year where they had all these expectations to make the World Series. And now they're looking to try to fix it all going into the offseason, but they'll have a new manager to do so. I know you have your take about that, and I'll defer to you.
So you said they won 74 games?
They won 74 games.
What was the payroll? $344 million?
Something like that.
Yeah, they paid almost $4.7 million per win, so. Meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets.
I think that's perfectly summed.
$4.7 million a win. Listen, I never had beef with the Mets up until the tarp incident of late September, and I will not get more PTSD by talking about it. That is all will have to say is
hey, at least you don't have to play the game on Monday. That's a good thing.
I mean, yeah, it's a positive, but it should be a win for us. And now I won't get 85 wins. We'll just have 84. But hey, it is what it is. But the Mets are getting a big upgrade because Buck Showalter was painfully mediocre for his entire career. So Mets, whatever happens, you get an upgrade.
Well, you're talking about his Mets career, right?
No, I mean everywhere. He was just painfully mediocre.
You. I love Buck Showalter.
I mean, do you like mediocrity?
Listen, Buck was a catalyst for the Yankees getting back to where they were in the late 90s.
And what did he do for you?
All right, listen. He got fired the year before they won the World Series. It happens. Mm-hmm. He made the postseason that year. They went to the ALCS.
Yep, and that's what he does.
I don't remember. I wasn't born.
I mean, listen.
I was not born.
I mean, listen. He's been managing for 30 years, and he's like 10 games above 500, something like that. Maybe like 50 games above 500.
Something like that.
I'm good. No, I like winners.
I'm just curious to see what the Mets will do. I think that's going to be a very tough decision because obviously it's going to come, whoever is the new manager is going to have a lot of, expectations going into, because the Mets will try to have themselves a good offseason to where they fix all the mess that happened this past season. And it's going to be another very interesting offseason for this team because, oh man, they got to fix everything. A lot of stuff went wrong. We were at the game. We talked about a lot of times today about how we were at that game on Thursday. There was a point in the game where they kept bringing in relievers, and I had no idea who they are. And you know me, Andrew. I know pretty much every single baseball player. I really thought those were NPCs on the field.
I did too.
I
really did too.
I don't know who Anthony K is. I don't know who that is.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they brought him in.
I now know who that is, but I didn't know who he was at the time.
Yeah, he's the guy who jobbed the Jazz. So
you're right.
That's who he is.
In a save situation, nonetheless, too. But yeah, the Mets will be looking at a new manager for this upcoming season as they look to get back into the postseason and be like one of these upcoming teams these 12 teams that are in the postseason. Well, I shouldn't say 12. That's not the. Oh no, I was right with my math, right?
What?
I can't do math right now. I was right with my math. 12 postseason teams. But
yes, 12. I was gonna say 14. I'm like, wait, there's only 3 wild card spots.
Yeah,
so it is 12.
It's been a long day of driving. I just got back from my trip in Buffalo. Shout out to my Uncle Greg and my Aunt Lindsay and my cousin Grace for a great weekend. But yeah, it's been a long week, so the math was definitely not with me at that moment of time. But I was right originally, so I shouldn't have second guessed myself. But before we end the show, Andrew, do you have any final comments about this upcoming MLB postseason?
I'm looking forward to a lot of baseball, and that's all I have to say before we end the show. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm just happy to be watching postseason. I'm just happy the Marlins kept me entertained. I said, listen, even if they didn't make the postseason, I was happy to watch a meaningful game in September. But now I get to watch them in October, so it's even better.
Right, you got to see a meaningful late season game for the Marlins that obviously ended in a rain delay, but it was still, meaningful at that time of the season. So
it's still very, very rewarding.
Listen, their first full season postseason berth since 2003, and obviously that was the year they went on to win the whole thing.
Yep. So I'm gonna order a trophy now.
Listen, I'm as a fan that doesn't have a team in the postseason, I'll be rooting for you guys.
I appreciate it.
Hopefully, it all goes well.
You're welcome on the bandwagon, unless you are a Phillies fan.
I'm not. No. Listen,
or a Braves fan.
Oh, okay. Well, I know someone that is a quote-unquote fan of that team.
Mm-hmm.
But being that as it may, you mentioned it, it should be a fun postseason. I'm really looking forward to this postseason action and see who comes out on top as the World Series champions. But we will be previewing every division, I shouldn't say division, but every postseason matchup and series as they go on. Once the wild card series are done, we'll go into a preview of the divisional round, then obviously the championship series, and then overall going into the World Series preview, as it will be another great season of the Fall Classic and this year's MLB postseason. We'll see how it all tunes out this upcoming October, maybe even into November. But that is going to do it for the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Another great MLB year has been concluded. We now get to see how these 12 teams do in this postseason run and who will come out on top as the World Series champions. This has been Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside by Andrew Johnson with the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Have a great rest of your weekend.